Hey everyone, this is John English from John English Antique Sports and Cards. We're just home from the National. If you came by our booth, thank you for coming by. We're down here in our basement. As you can see behind me, we sort cards all the time. We look for cards. That's not really what my main focus is, but I know that everybody does cards, so we do cards also. So this project started almost a year ago when I sent some freshly found 57 football, basically out of vending boxes. We got those grades back, and yes, we did get some 8s and 9s, but most of them were PSA 6. And I've sent 15,000 cards to PSA starting in about the year 2000, when it was like $5 a card. So it's not like we don't know what the grade should be. As I said in my previous videos, PSA has changed the grading standards to the point that really quality cards are coming back. I think their default is a 6. So what I did, I took our 6s from that basically vending find, and I went out and bought higher grades of the exact same cards that I have 6s on. I kept the 6s, they're in a box over here. But what we've got back now, and you can watch the other videos that we have, but I went and cracked basically 7s and 8s and sent them back into PSA. Today, when we got home from the National, we had a box waiting from us after about 4 months that these cards are now back from PSA, and I would like to show you all the results. So here we go. Bear with me. So what we did is to crack the exact cards from these earlier PSA, and my contention is that the earlier grades are anywhere from 1 to 3 higher than what people are getting today. And to prove that point, I went out and spent basically $1,000 plus grading fees on these higher cards, and I will show you my cards after we get this done. But so to the point, we'll just go card by card. All right, so Bobby Watkins, he came back a 6. He was a 6 originally, came back a 6. Tom Scott came back a 6. He was originally an 8. Don Henrik came back a 7. Kenny Kuntz came back a 5. I had 2 Gordy Soltau. One was a 7. One came back a 6. They were both graded 8. Dražnović dropped 4 grades. Oluski dropped 3 grades. So those were the 57 footballs. We also had some 57 baseball. The Indians team went 6 to 6. Bob Speak dropped a grade. Barclay dropped 2 grades. Lemon dropped 2 grades. Wisnut dropped 2 grades. Daly dropped 2 grades. He dropped 3 grades. Arroyo dropped 1 grade. Pisoni dropped 1 grade. Another Pisoni dropped 1 grade, and Duke Moss stayed the same. So then we had 59s basically in the same find. Blackburn stayed the same. Del Crandall dropped 2. Jerry Staley dropped 3. Bobby dropped 2. Art Fowler dropped 2. Gene Schneider dropped 1. And Wally Moon dropped 3. So as you can see, my contention that with the PSA grading, today's standards are graded at a much higher standards than what was graded in the past. As you can see these labels, and of course you can see these were all sent in, and these are all what we broke out, and there's no funny business going on, as the SKU numbers are consecutive. Also, too, I'm going to now lay out what my cards look like against the old cards, and you can see. But again, my contention is that if PSA has changed the standards, they should have started a new registry, because my new 6s versus these old 8s, they don't mean anything anymore. So again, let me show you what my cards look like compared to these cards. Okay, so we're back, and what I've done is I've laid out my cards that are, you can see the SKU number, the 735, and then it goes in some order of just, but the other ones are 296, 114, mine's 101. Anyway, so to my point, so Bobby Watkins was 6, mine was a 6. Look how much centered this is compared to this one. All right, we'll take that one for granted. I don't really know what the reasoning is there. And of course, you could talk about backs. Well, we can look at backs. I mean, that back is pretty well square. This back is miscut, and they graded it a 6. I don't really understand that grading. Okay, but anyway, so then Tom Scott went from an 8 to a 6, and my 7 is much better centered. As you can see, all of these were the most centered 57s and the nicest surfaces and corners that I've seen in a long time. Well, they originally had this one at 8. Now it's a 6, and I have to sell my 7 to an old 8, which makes no sense to me. I mean, this card should be an 8 or a 9. There's no question about that. In the old grading standards, probably a 9. Let's look at the back. Very close, pretty decent back. The next one went from an 8 to a 7, and again, my card, they're both fairly well centered, but again, looking at the backs, no top at all. They graded it a 7 from an 8. Mine was an 8. Before early standards, most of these cards are going to be 9s, as 8s or 9s, as you can see. Moving on down the line is we've got Kuntz, again, went from a 7 to a 5. Miscued, miscut on the back. Mine's perfectly centered on the front. Pretty good centered on the back. Probably, again, an 8 in old grading standards. Then we've got Gordy. Gordy went from an 8 to a 7. They graded mine a 6. Well, excuse me, let's see. That they graded that one. This one, I'm sorry. This one was mine. So my 8, you can see perfectly centered, good on the back. So again, a 7 versus 8. Look at the color difference too. Droznovich went from an 8 to a 4. Must be a crease that they didn't see. And if they're using AI, you know, the problem with our hobby right now is there's no really accountability. Nobody knows what's going on behind the scenes. If PSA has gone to AI, and a perfect example of this might be this particular card going from an 8 to a 4, what's the surface problem? Is there a wrinkle that your eye can't see, that a grader couldn't see? Well, if they've gone to AI, I'm all for it, because then the standards are all the same. But when it's all said and done, it does nothing for these new card grade versus the old card grades, as we are demonstrating. So you go down the line, you went from a 8 to a 5. My 7, again, this 8 is nowhere near as good as my 7, and it's a little bit on the back skewed. Probably a fair grade on that one. And then you just go down the line, and we'll just show you down the line. But it's the same all the way across the board. There's no question that my 6s, my 7s, and my 8s are way better than these higher grade cards that were graded earlier. So again, I think that PSA needs to be transparent. They don't have to do anything. They're making a boatload of money, and they have raised the standards for the card collecting industry. But with responsibility and that the reward that they've gone, their responsibility is to be transparent. And there's no transparency at PSA right now. The grades, there's no question that these new card grades are much lower than the old card grades. We've demonstrated that. So I've not sent many cards to SGC, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to crack my 6s and I'm going to send them to SGC, and I have a feeling that most of my 6s are going to be 7s and 8s. Now, I know that PSA has bought SGC because they are cutting into their revenue. All right, that's fine. But again, if we're using AI, if PSA will be transparent, then the registry, and you guys that have all the registry sets, I hate it, but the registry shouldn't be, they should start a new registry because my 6s should be priced the same as the old 8s. And again, I've demonstrated that. So you guys just take this in. If you have any questions, we value feedback. Come see us in Shelbyville, and the last step is SGC, and I will let you know when we get to that point. Thank you so much. The thing is that you're starting to see cards get damaged, and they're starting to be damaged. If you look at people, they get on YouTube and they talk about cards, they're damaged in the right corner. And what that tells me is they're coming through chutes and they're getting snagged in the corners. There's no way that I would send a damaged corner in to PSA. So PSA, the skew, and people, I don't know if they're really looking at them hard. The graders don't know that they're coming through, or the scanners are just scanning what comes through. And if they hit a corner, snag a card, tough tookie, you know. So again, I think that, to your point, I think that if PSA is using unqualified people, or people that have been doing it less than 6 months to a year, they need to have a vintage grading and they need to have a new grading, because the cards are so different. And kids that are just coming in, they shouldn't be allowed to look at old cards based on new card grades, because they're not going to, you know, and somebody can say all cards should be graded the same. Maybe, but the new surfaces are completely different than the old surfaces. The paper is completely different than the paper. So you have to take all of those things into account. PSA needs to be transparent in their presentation of how they grade cards, and they're not. So take it or leave it. You know, that's their attitude, which it's terrible that you have a service business and your attitude is just take it or leave it. But when you have the only game in town and they're making billions, millions, billions of dollars, they don't give a crap. It's a terrible customer service situation. They make money and they don't care whether they do right or not. They just throw them out there. They're taking your 20. The biggest thing now is minimum sizing. Okay, so that tells me that they have fed the size of a standard card into a computer, and the presses that cut these vintage cards, there was no perfect cut it's close, but it's really interesting to me that you're paying $20 a card. You send in a card, it gets minimum size. They keep your $20. And you know what cards mostly are getting minimum sized? The big star cards, the Mickey Mantles, the Jackie Robinsons. So what's that telling me? They know that you're going to send those cards back in. And that's the shame of it. If you want to make more money, then just tell us you're going to upcharge $50 a card, because what happens is I get a minimum size Mickey Mantle back. I'm going to send it back in another order to see if I can get it put into plastic. They're holding it another 4 months. So I have got $40 and 8 months in that Mickey Mantle. Again, I don't, there's no transparency. There's no, and the only thing that I can think about is because in my first 10,000 cards that I got sent in, I might have had maybe 10 cards minimum sized out of 10,000. And now all of them quite a few are being minimum sized. So what that's telling me is that they've got a computer eye reading it, and if it's not, it just kicks it out. That's what it's telling me. But I don't know that for a fact because PSA won't tell us what they're doing. Anyway.